Shalom. This week's Torah portion that we'll be reading this Shabbat is Devarim, literally words, and it's the first Torah portion of the book of Devarim, known by some as Deuteronomy. Our sages actually refer to this book as Mishnah Torah, which literally means a repetition of the Torah, a review, or more properly, an explanation of the Torah. Indeed, our sages emphasize that there's a difference between this fifth and last book of the Torah and the previous four. The four books of the Torah were spoken by Hashem and transmitted through Moshe, but Devarim was spoken directly by Moshe. Moshe gave over this entire book during the last 5 weeks of his life, beginning on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, the first day of the month of Shvat, and concluding on the day his soul departed from this world, on the 7th day of Adar. Now that we've finished the book of Numbers, we are witness to a new reality. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our master, seeks to prepare his beloved people for their entry into the land. He will not be accompanying them there. He needs to remind them of their moral compass, of all they have been through and all they have witnessed, of their destiny and purpose. He needs to exhort them and to guide them and rebuke them. And most of all, he needs to strengthen them. And the whole of the book of Devarim is about how to serve God through the twin complementary attributes of love and fear. This parsha, the Torah portion of Devarim, invariably is read before Tisha B'Av. You know, there's actually something very special about this Shabbat this week. The Shabbat that precedes Tisha B'Av, the day of fasting and mourning for the destruction of the holy temples that occurred on that very day, that happened in time because it's the same day that the spies returned to the encampment of Israel in the desert and they gave over their evil report about the land of Israel, and that resulted in Tisha B'Av. That Shabbat, the one right before the 9th of Av, is known as Shabbat Chazon, which literally means the Sabbath of the vision. It takes its name from the first verse of the book of Isaiah, the chapter that's read on this Shabbat as the Haftarah, the prophetic reading. First verse, first chapter, the vision of Isaiah, son of Amoz, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for Hashem has spoken. Children I have raised and exalted, yet they have rebelled against me. Now, the deepest and most beautiful tradition relates that Shabbat Chazon, the Sabbath of the vision, the one before Tisha B'Av, is actually the greatest, most powerful Shabbat of the entire year. And that on some level, perhaps it's subliminal, perhaps it's subconscious, perhaps it's very conscious. On some level, every single Jew merits a vision, a chazon, Sabbath of vision, a vision of the holy temple rebuilt. I have pondered that teaching for many years, trying to understand exactly what it means. What does it mean exactly that every single person receives a vision? I know it varies from person to person. This I know from my own life experience. My assumption is that the implication is that each one will see the temple as it fits his expectations or limitations or hopes. But you know, this year, Shabbat Chazon, the Sabbath of the vision, is especially powerful and special and amazing because it's not the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av, it is actually Tisha B'Av itself. And since we cannot fast on Shabbat or mourn, but on the contrary, Shabbat reflects consistently, universally, an aspect of joy and love in our relationship with God. It's a revelation. And we must not act any differently on this Shabbat in any way that could be observed that we are mourning. You're even allowed to have meat and wine at the table on Shabbat, even though it's actually Tisha B'Av. So somehow we enter into a vortex. Is that what it's called? A time warp? We transcend time. And we unite with the roots of all things, which is indeed the aspect of Shabbat. And the light of Hashem's love that reaches us on Shabbat supersedes Tisha B'Av, so that we will fast on Sunday. It's just deferred, not as strong, that fast on Sunday, not as powerful because it's kind of like a makeup. Could it really happen on Shabbat? But what could we do? What could we do? He apparently doesn't want us to fast. Shabbat, described in the holy books as the level of banim, of children, of the revelation that no matter what we have done, who we are, we're all Hashem's children, right? What does Deuteronomy 14 says? You are children of Hashem your God. And didn't Hashem tell Moshe to tell old Pharaoh himself, my firstborn Israel, back in Exodus chapter 4? So the sages explain that what Shabbat means, it means this aspect of our relationship as children. So what's amazing? We read in the second verse of this Haftarah, hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for Hashem has spoken, semicolon. Children I have raised and exalted, yet they have rebelled against me. So open up your heart in the deepest way. Honestly now, this is a very, very important thought. This is a terrible rebuke that God is telling through the prophet Isaiah. I have raised children and exalted them, but they have rebelled against me. But he still calls us children. That's what the secret of the verse is. Even in that rebuke, he's calling us children. So the holy Shabbat is the level of banim, of children. And on this Shabbat, and Tisha B'Av, it falls out on Shabbat, is the greatest Shabbat of the entire year. And who said that? Actually, do you remember a few weeks ago? We were studying Parashat Balak, and I had occasion to quote the holy Abderav. He's the one who said this. He said that in the midst of the darkness of these dire days that are known as Bein HaMetzarim, between the straits, these days of intensified mourning over the Holy Temple, between these days we have this Shabbat, Shabbat Chazon, on which the vision that Israel are always called his children is revealed. Maybe that's the secret of the vision that we get of the Holy Temple. And on Shabbat, there's no mourning, because it's only the greatest revelation of love. But on this Shabbat, again, it's not just Shabbat Chazon, it's actually Tisha B'Av itself, but it doesn't matter. So on this Shabbat Chazon, there's no goal in being sad. And I want to clarify, sadness is a destructive force. We're supposed to serve Hashem only with joy. But anyway, even when it comes to observing Tisha B'Av properly on the day that we'll be observing it, listen to this. Mourning is not about that the temple was destroyed in the past. It's about that it has not yet been built. In my generation, as the sages of Israel stated, any generation that does not rebuild the Holy Temple is guilty of destroying it, is considered as the generation in which it was destroyed. So I am mourning because I am the problem. And it's that it hasn't yet been rebuilt because I haven't yet rebuilt it. That's why we're mourning. So we start out the book of Devarim, this holy Shabbat, and we read, Moshe began to explain the Torah. And here's what we read. These are the words which Moshe spoke to all of Israel on that side of the Jordan, in the desert, in the plain, opposite the Red Sea, between Paran and Tophel and Lavan and Chatzerot and Dizahav. It is 11 days' journey from Chorev by way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. It came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, in the first of the month, that Moses spoke to the children of Israel according to all that Hashem had commanded him regarding them. Verse 4, after he had smitten Sichon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and Og, king of the Bashan, who dwelt in Ashtaroth and Edrei. On that side of the Jordan, in the land of Israel, Moshe began to explain this Torah, saying, those are the first 5 verses of this Torah portion. Moshe began to explain, and the word used here to explain is be'er. He began be'er to explain, and the very same word means a well. Very same word exactly, spelled the same, written the same, well of water, because he opened this well for all future generations. But what is unusual about these verses that we just read is that they seem to imply that Moshe was only able to begin explaining the Torah after he had smote Sichon and Og. Why does the verse go out of its way to tell us after he had smitten, verse 4, after he had smitten Sichon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and Og, king of the Bashan, on that side of the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moshe began to explain this Torah. Apparently, the liquidation of these two kings was pivotal. Verses implying that he was only able to explain the Torah after he smote Sichon and Og. Couldn't have explained it before this. Why is that? Now, Psalms 136 is a very, very important and beautiful psalm. It is 26 verses long. Psalms 136. It's 26 lines of praise. And it begins with the words, give thanks to Hashem, give thanks to the Lord because he is good, for his kindness is eternal. Acknowledge, give praise, give thanks to the Lord because he's good, for his kindness is eternal. And each line in the 26 lines of praise ends with those three words, for his kindness is eternal. And brings all sorts of things there, historical things that God has done for his people throughout the generations, and each stanza ends with the refrain, Ki li'olam chasto, that in fact it would be congregational. The reader would intone the line, and then everyone would answer, Ki li'olam chasto, for his kindness is eternal. For example, we read there, to him who led his people in the desert, for his kindness is eternal. And then verse 17, to him who smote great kings, for his kindness is eternal. And verse 18, and slew mighty kings, for his kindness is eternal. And verse 19, Sichon, the king of the Amorites, for his kindness is eternal. And verse 20, and Og, the king of the Bashan, for his kindness is eternal. And verse 21, and he gave their land as an inheritance, for his kindness is eternal. So this is strange, because the verse 6:17 reads, to him who smote great kings, for his kindness is eternal. And then, and slew mighty kings, for his kindness is eternal. There were other kings that the children of Israel had to face off with. But in verses 19 and 20, Sichon and Og are singled out. Why do you have to go and spend 2 verses? We know how economical the Torah is with words, and how no word is wasted. Every word is very special and laden with meaning. So why do you have to tell me who smote great kings and slew mighty kings, but then, like Sichon and Og, deserve special mention? Why is that? So our sages teach us that these 2 kings, Sichon and Og, were the 2 most difficult klipot, that means forces, that were preventing the children of Israel from entering into the land. Their presence was like they were sitting and guarding the border, the openings of the land, as it were, like a supernatural power of impurity, and they would not allow Israel in. To keep the purity of the light of Hashem out was their goal, and they were like, some of the sages write, they were like the mezuzot of the other side. They were like the force of evil, keeping the children of Israel out. They were the guardians of the 7 idolatrous nations. So these forces were so powerful that only Moshe himself could break them. And that's why from all these great and mighty kings, these 2 are mentioned separately, and Moshe could not bring out his revelations until after he liquidated them. Open up your heart, please. What does this mean on the practical level of serving God for us today? Sichon and Og are representative of this kalipa, the force that comes up. And where were they? On the opening to the land of Israel on the border. They are representative of the force that comes up, that raises its head when a person is on the verge of reaching the goal, When a person is ready to implement the next positive step in the fulfillment of destiny, then this force rises up and doesn't let us reach this goal. Thus these two, after 40 years that Israel traversed in the desert, when they were about to reach the loftiest level, to enter into the land and to receive its holiness and to hear the review of the Mishnah Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, just then, Sichon and Og reared up to block this destiny and prevent Israel from reaching their goal. And only after Moshe subdued this force, Moshe began to explain the Torah and opened up the Be'er, the well, saying, etc. Because only then were the people of Israel able to receive this light, and then the lock on the land of Israel and the Torah itself was open for them. So thinking about all this and this beautiful configuration of Parashat Devarim and Shabbat Chazon, which is Tisha B'Av itself, and our desire to break the lock of the cycle, to enter into the land for real, for good, to build the temple. Because our goal of Tisha B'Av is not about sadness, it's not about mourning. If we're mourning, it's because we haven't rebuilt the temple. I would like to offer a new thought, another level of meaning regarding maybe why this Parsha, the Torah portion of Devarim, coincides with Shabbat Chazon and Tisha B'Av. Because there are these klipot at our door. Because of this feature of the Torah portion, the whole thing starting, the whole Be'er opening, the whole explanation coming, the whole preparation for coming into the land of Israel only can be done after these forces are removed. And again, translating this into practical terms for our service of God every day, because that's what Torah is here to teach us. What does that mean? We all have goals. We all have what we feel is the destiny that we have to fulfill, the occasion that we have to rise to, and we all know exactly what this means. There's no kidding anyone. We all know that when it comes to that point, there is a force that stops us. And that could very well be internal as well, and it could be of our own making, and it certainly can be external as well. We have our own forces that are keeping us out from fulfilling our destiny, and maybe the reason that we read this is to show us and to remind us that we also have to break the klipa, the forces that are keeping us back from entering into the land, from rebuilding the Holy Temple, from breaking the lock and the cycle, and the lock of the cycle of time that holds us prisoner and keeps us down and prevents us from going into the land, metaphorically, as it will for some of us, yes, to come into the land, for all of us to come into the land together, to bring the light in, exactly what Sichon and Og were afraid of. And that light is centered in and upon and comes forth from Jerusalem, from the Holy Temple. And all these things are coming together on this Shabbat in the most remarkable way. Shabbat Chazon, when we're equipped with the ability to see a little bit further. Parashat Devarim, hearing these words of Moshe, preparing us for entering in with all his heart, after breaking the forces for us that hold us back, and take that to where we need to be today. We all have these things to deal with, and they're all lurking, these forces, on the edge, on the border, right where we need to go in. And that comes to a deafening crescendo with the national goal and destiny that Tisha B'Av represents, of getting out of the mindset that we're mourning with sadness for the loss of the temple. If we want to build the temple, let's build it. The only thing to mourn for is that we're not building it, because no other way is it going to happen. So the forces that are lurking on the border of our own consciousness, of our own potential, of our own minds, of our own inadequacy or feeling that we are not ready or whatever it is, they're not going to go away until we confront them and realize that it's up to us to make the vision of Shabbat Chazon come true and to fulfill our destiny to rebuild the Holy Temple, to bring the light of Hashem into the world, and to uplift all of humanity to the level where we are all united in the service and recognition, unity, happiness, and peace that only comes about with connection to the one true God. And may this Tisha B'Av turn for us from a day of mourning into a day of gladness, when we decide collectively that the time has come to rebuild the Holy Temple.